for truth.
Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted frontiers of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together, we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blend the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean. And
Welcome to... Yeah, go ahead. Welcome to episode 38.
Yes, that first. So if we sound a little weird or off, it's because...
Or you feel, you catch us like, I don't know, slipping up.
Yeah. We're having a little weird audio glitch. Some of my software updated over the last week, and saying this sentence is really hard. This episode's going to be crazy.
The delay is quite significant. So like knowing you're talking and then hearing the words just delayed a bit is off-put or throws you off a little bit.
I just took one ear off and it helps a lot.
Oh, maybe I'll
try
do that.
That
could help.
So the software is acting a little different than it has been, and it's causing a little bit of extra delay in our ears. And so everything we say is coming back into our heads at a little bit after what it should. And
so it's throwing us off, but you guys probably won't notice.
Yeah, like as we're talking, it makes me feel like I'm like I'm drunk.
You know what it does?
Which I am drinking a beer, but this is the first beer, and I'm not even all the way through it.
It forces you to slow down, even though like it's you're hearing the words slowly come back to you, so it forces you to slow down whether you want to or not. So then by the end of the sentence, you're like, this sentence is finally ending. You know? It just sounds weird.
Have you heard of that phenomenon called? They're called shepherd tones. It's like a music
I've heard of
thing.
it, but I don't know much about it.
It's essentially an audio illusion where like you can make a tone that sounds to your ear like it's always rising.
But it's not actually.
Right, because it can't, because we can only hear a certain range.
True.
But
if it goes up slow enough.
It uses harmonics, and like as the pitch shifts up and a harmonic falls off, it'll bring a new one in at the bottom.
Oh, so it's kind of like sliding. It's like a Michael
like
Jackson walk of the
sliding.
tone.
And so you hear it going up and up and up and up and up.
But it really is dropping down and then up, dropping down and then up, dropping down and then up.
Yeah. But it's kind of maddening, and this is like almost the opposite effect, where it's like we feel like we're slow, and so you slow down, and then you slow down.
In order to catch up with it, yeah.
To match weird. It. Pretty disorienting.
It's better though with the ear off. I turned this down a little bit too, so I
you know what we could do actually with one ear off? We can just mute our own talking and just talk normal to each other.
Down for that.
We'll still be able to hear the videos we play. Yeah, this already feels a lot better.
Yeah, we'll try to get this figured out by the next time.
Yeah. All right. So what are we talking about today, Drew?
So we're going to do Secret History of the World. I think it's part 8. Is that right? Or we're part 9 maybe?
That's a good question.
I think we're part 9 now.
The last 2 were like hybrid episodes, so they weren't full Secret Histories.
Disclosure. That was part 8. And that was chapter 12 of Secret History of the World.
So this is part 9.
Yeah, and chapter 12... talked a little bit about the origins of music and like the mathematics and like the great, what was it called? Can't remember the name. But we went over, it was the Moses and the Kabbalah, Solomon, Sheba and Hiram, and then we did King Arthur and like the descent into darkness. We talked a lot about the kind of the esoteric teachings of that time period. With Moses, we went over some stories and stuff about it.
Yeah, I remember going over some of the Moses stuff. I don't remember really covering the Arthur stuff much, but
I think we skipped that part towards the end.
Yeah.
But we talked a little bit about the wizard and like the idea, like the wizard, the iconography of it, and like how it kind of shaped a lot of the esoteric teachings of that time period. But yeah, so we'll be covering chapter 13. But before that, we don't have many.
Oh yeah, you had some videos.
Yeah, we don't have many YouTube comments or anything like that this week. So
we did have one that I just caught that was just a comment on a
couple weeks ago.
Instagram posts where we were sharing episode, and it was from ZRAM7 on Instagram. He said, "Those infernal ice cream machines." This is a comment on episode 34 where we're talking about, we did that segment on the
McDonald's conspiracy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
I was just telling someone about that the other day. That's a really fun story to have for like small talk with people.
Just an anecdote that most people don't know about.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. When I heard about it, I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is great!"
Make a conspiracy.
Remember, we went on.
It's a good way to make a conspiracy theorist out of someone.
Oh yeah, you start small, right? But what was it? What was that? The website that the guy made to track all of the downed machines. It's in our old episode. We'd have to go to it. But
was
McTracker.com or something.
McBroken.com.
McBroken, that's what it was. It was McBroken.com. And the one near us, one of the ones that we grew up near, was broken at that time. Yeah, there it is.
Let's have a check. 32% of ice cream machines are broken in New York. 20% in San Francisco.
The numbers were pretty similar last time.
20.5% in San Antonio.
Currently broken is 14.72% of all McDonald's ice cream machines in this area. 14% of them.
That's crazy.
But yeah, we found the one that was near our hometown and is broken, just like I remember.
Wonder if they're still broken. Let's have a check.
It looks like it's fixed now.
Oh yeah, they're fixed.
Yeah.
Oh no, they're fixed.
Yeah. So maybe they're since the conspiracy came out, their maintenance got a lot better.
I mean, just in our area.
True.
There's still 3 broken in our area that I can see.
I love it. So I've got some Instagram. You know how when you're just scrolling through Instagram and you send it to a buddy, this is kind of what we're gonna do live. I send a lot of this stuff to Dean, but he doesn't check his.
I do not.
So what I do is I save them, or I'll send them to myself so we can do it during the show.
Is this the actor for the new Addams Family remake?
No.
He looks like it.
He looks like it, but he's...
What's the guy? Cousin...
Yeah, Uncle Fester.
Uncle Fester. He looks like... Dude, he totally...
looks like him, but I don't think he's...
I hate to insult the guy, but...
No, I think the new
Netflix Fester one with Jenna Ortega, he looks just like the Uncle Fester who's cast in that.
He totally does, especially after the makeup and everything.
All right, so I take it this one has audio. All right, let's
Yes, it does.
Let's check this out.
I'm going to tell you a story about humanity.
Okay.
And like any good...
We'll start this over again, but...
you want to lay some context?
So this is Daryl Anka. This is the guy... This is not Bashar.
Oh, this is the guy.
This is the guy, Daryl Anka.
Oh, he looks so different under this lighting.
Yeah. So he's the one who channels Bashar.
Gotcha.
And he's talking about over the last 40 years, he's been channeling Bashar. This is the story that he has accumulated through all of the different channeling sessions, I guess.
So this is kind of like the whole message that he's like put together from his experience of being
specifically about the human history and our development and our origins and our generation, basically. So
okay,
that's just to lay some context, and then so we'll play this.
Let's check this out.
Going to tell you a story about humanity, and like any good story, we need to start at the beginning. A lot of people want to know what the beginning was like for humanity. So after channeling for 40 years, the information has often been asked, where did we come from? The way the story goes from the information gathered from the channeling is as follows. Many hundreds of thousands of years ago, the natural hominid that evolved upon the earth, that we often refer to as Homo erectus, existed, and at one point, the story goes, an extraterrestrial race visited the earth. They came to Earth to mine minerals that would help them create a balance on their planet. And in taking on this task, they began to realize that it was quite daunting and would take a long time, longer than they had. It was very important to balance out the weather on their planet with the minerals for a very, very short period of time. And so they needed help in order to do this. They began to look around and saw the natural hominids that had evolved here, who were close enough physically to the extraterrestrials that they thought perhaps if we can somehow train them to be of assistance in mining these minerals, the task will go faster. But being master geneticists, they felt that a way to accomplish this would be to take their own genetics and inject them into the hominids and create them to be a little bit more like the extraterrestrial race so they would be easier to train, so that they would be able to understand what the task was all about and help the extraterrestrials, who were called the Anu, or the Anunnaki. So they undertook a program of genetic alteration where they introduced their own genetics into Homo erectus and other early hominids and began to create what became us, Homo sapiens. A lot of people talk about the idea of evolution, and they talk about the idea of thinking that there must have been a kind of missing link between early hominids and Homo sapiens, because there seems to be an evolutionary jump that occurred where suddenly we gained much more brain power, much more brain capacity, and it hasn't yet been fully satisfactorily explained how that occurred. It may be possible that this so-called missing link is actually the extraterrestrials that came to Earth so long ago and injected their DNA into the early hominid in order to create Homo sapiens. As humans were created, then they began to act as a workforce to help accelerate the mining operations that were so important to the ETs and allowed them to accomplish their task within a timely manner. However, the idea is that because the ETs were so advanced, these early humans began to kind of look upon them as godlike beings, and they began to think of them as something far above humanity. Also, the ETs may have acted to keep the humans at a certain level. In many of the stories that exist in early documents, such as the Bible, these stories are told, but they have been sort of mythologized. And I think they do represent something a little bit more literal. When it talks about the idea, such as the Garden of Eden, and how the gods did not want humans to be as smart as they are, to know the things that they knew, and how eating from the tree of knowledge caused them to be expelled from the Garden of Eden, so to speak. This may be a metaphor for what actually happened in terms of humans seeing the gods and wanting to understand what the gods knew, what the ETs knew. But the ETs wanted to prevent that, because then they would be like them and they would know the things they knew, and they couldn't necessarily use them as labor anymore. They would want independence, as any thinking being probably does. So they curtailed their knowledge, they curtailed their ability perhaps even to learn that knowledge by not necessarily turning on certain markers in our DNA, and by leaving those markers off, preventing us from actually being able to learn too much of what the ETs knew and how they operated, so that we wouldn't become equal to them. So the idea is that eventually the extraterrestrials on the planet that these beings came from may have in fact learned about what these ETs had done in creating Homo sapiens. Now, as far as the story goes, it's possible that they have breached their own laws by doing this. It may not have been something that they were actually allowed to do in creating a sentient species. And so the story goes that they were recalled to their own planet, and that from that point forward, once Homo sapiens had been created, the ETs that had recalled the group that came to Earth knew that they couldn't just abandon mankind. They had to guide them from that point forward until they were assured that mankind could perhaps take care of themselves, could understand basic relationships and basic laws, and could create a society that was self-sustaining. And so the ETs sought to teach mankind things like agriculture and mathematics and so on, so that humankind could become self-sustaining. But I think this is where the stories come from, of visitations from the gods over time, to lead us on certain paths, to teach us certain things, to watch over us and guide us. And this relationship, I think, solidified the idea that eventually became the religions of the world, where we know that there is something observing us. We know that there is something higher than us. Now, this in no way, shape, or form negates the idea of the spiritual nature of God or the spiritual nature of humanity. But I think these things have become enmeshed. These two stories have become intertwined and enmeshed with one another. And therefore, there is nowadays no separation between the idea of God as a spirit and the souls of humanity and the idea of who created us. But I think these are actually two distinctly different stories. While we do have a spiritual beginning, I think we also have a different physical beginning that began, as this story tells us, with the ETs that came to Earth and created Homo sapiens. But they have stayed around to guide us after recalling the group that created us, being that that creation was against their laws. So in guiding us, we now have all the stories of being led through the desert, of being taught how to build certain devices, how to create societies, how to have relationships. And this comes across, because the stories have been intertwined, as things like commandments from God, which I think in the early days was simply teaching humanity ways to live, ways to understand how not to fight each other and so on and so forth, how to get along, so that they knew that they could eventually leave us to our own devices and that we could build societies that would one day allow us to sort of reclaim our position among the stars, being the children of extraterrestrial beings. So as the story goes, the way the ETs gave us the information that we needed is they literally came down to Earth. They taught us, they showed us how to do things practically. A lot of the old stories of wheels in the sky and fiery demons landing on top of mountaintops and dispensing information can literally be thought of as the ETs coming down to Earth, showing themselves, and literally sort of taking us by the hand and saying, this is the way you do this. This is how you plant seeds. This is how you build these things. These are the tools you need. And when humanity learned enough, then the ETs sought to sort of, again, leave humanity on its own. They may have guided us with their ships. They may have sent messages down to Earth now and then, messengers who gave us the information we may have needed at that moment. But they mostly started leaving us to our own devices, according to the story, so that again, they would watch, they would guide from afar, and over time, have less and less contact with us to see where we would take the information that they imparted to us, to see if we could survive on our own, if we could learn to build a civilization. I'm going to tell you a story.
Dang.
So yeah, I really like that.
That's a really
it's a
nice,
great storytelling,
concise, and simple, distillation of the sort of kind of what people are all converging on from all sides of the sort of Anunnaki,
UFO, spiritual
gods,
stuff,
like
historical
comparative religion sort of story.
Yep. Yeah, he does it. Like, you get a lot of the 12th planet, Zecharia Sitchin stuff, but it's like, it's more reasonable.
Yeah,
And
like
it's
there's
not with
there's a
all
lot
of
of
the
details
extra.
in Zechariah Sitchin's
They're
telling of it
unnecessary.
that don't make a ton of sense. Like,
You could tell they're just to make this, like, you could basically just, they're just parts to make the story sound that much more amazing.
right.
But where this is more concise, like, these are all the story was written on the tablets, like this whole story, and Zechariah Sitchin's version of it was just that. It was his version of it.
Yeah. Now, I
But
think
this seems like a different version of like the story of the Anunnaki and their interaction with us.
Right.
And it, the way he describes it so kind of calmly and like without all the extra fluff, he just says this is kind of how it was and whatnot. As far as the story goes,
I really appreciated how he said, like, this historical story has gotten confused with like the spiritual nature, like our spiritual quest of understanding
the creator
of the universe, right? Like there could still be,
there's still a philosophical thing to dig at there,
right? Like there could still be
outside of
this
this
God who set the universe in motion, who's not, as so many skeptics would point out, like, why would God be some guy on a freaking cloud coming down and messing with humanity? Like,
right.
why would he be down here like micromanaging us when he created the entire universe? Like, it doesn't make a ton of sense.
Well, and it actually leads me back to Owaspy in a sense, right? So you still got the overall, like the spiritual version, like the spiritual idea of God, and then you have these ETs who are other entities in the universe that have way more knowledge than we do, but may not be like a direct interaction with the God, like, because obviously they were part of what has been created. So without it having to be like some formal, like, you go here at this time, like commandments from God for them to interact with us on this planet or whatever, but it all just being a part of like fate, or divine intervention or divine, whatever you might want to call it. But like just part of the way things pan out, right? So like God is whatever the creator is, its goal is to create. Like
Right.
the intention was to create, and these beings came here with a different problem,
Right.
trying to solve a problem for themselves, and in
They had
so
some
doing,
sort of practical civilizational issue.
and in so doing, created more intelligent beings that can one day, hopefully, if we don't destroy ourselves, get to be back among the stars, as he says, trying to get back to our.
It explains
Our
some
ancestors.
of the, like, I mean, we haven't totally dived fully into this story yet.
Not yet.
on
We've
the
been dancing
podcast.
around a lot of
We've been
it.
dancing around it, but I feel like we've been like laying the groundwork for approaching it from a bunch of different angles. And obviously, like, this is like cuckoo shit for people who are very scientifically minded. But if you just like pause your skepticism for a second, let the story wash over you, like take in some of the arguments for what this story is, you can it is such a like a logical narrative that makes sense of a lot of the weirdnesses of mankind.
The synchronicities.
We have this like weird I feel like in our nature itself, like we have this sort of like weird dichotomy of like being ruled by our passions and our lower nature and having this sort of higher self. This is that like internal dialogue we all struggle with, right? And it, like something of that could come from this sort of two natures that we have, this sort of like accelerated genetic input put on top of what had already naturally evolved on Earth.
Right.
It can explain things that don't make a ton of sense to me. Also, like why? So if you're a being from another planet that say is farther or maybe closer, would make more sense, I guess, farther from their sun, and you need to absorb more of the sunlight.
Right.
It makes a lot more sense to be like a bald creature.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas
hairless,
here, like, we get sunburns, like we're not exactly
fit for this environment.
In every way. Like nature is very ruthless to us, where we don't have
a lot of the protections that other animals who were naturally evolved and had no interaction other than now humans. But yeah, we have so many features or non-features to be suitable for the planet. And our direct descendant, our direct ancestors, the ones we believe we came from directly, have a lot of those.
Right.
So why would they de-evolve in some areas when you're evolving in others?
Right.
Like, that's kind of a weird thing.
Wouldn't we, like, I've always, not always, but like when I start thinking down these lines and you start thinking about like the path of evolution we've taken, like it doesn't make a ton of sense to me in this Earth environment for us to evolve and lose our natural built-in protections.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Like,
and like we were talking about, like that Dr. Ellis Silver who wrote a book, Men Are Not From Earth.
Men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
No, this is the Humans Are Not From Earth.
Oh, right.
Book where he lays out all of the different evidences and points about just humans are not suited for this planet, and it just makes sense that they were either originated from another planet or were somehow altered to be like somebody, or to have the genetic structure of a being not from this planet.
Yeah.
Like they talk about the this is where I got that concept of the vestigial like lens that we have the gland for, but we don't have the lens, and like it's not a functioning thing in our anatomy anymore. But other earlier hominids had those types of things.
Interesting.
And other animals, other mammals even have those features to protect themselves. And then back problems, like things like that, where we, like it just, intuitively you would think an animal suited for this earth in this gravity to be standing upright would have evolved the ability to have strong backs. That aren't susceptible to like over carrying or carrying too much weight, or being in an awkward position that hurts your back, or whatever it might be that eventually deteriorates your back.
There's definitely a certain degree of our modern life is what's screwing us up here.
Sure. But then again, that's part of evolution too, right? Eventually we're going to get to the point where we're going to have humpbacks.
If we had evolved to be intelligent, if we had evolved to live in civilization, if we had evolved to be specifically to use our mind and not our body as much, you would think our body would have evolved for some of those changes, right?
Or will evolve for that.
Well, yeah.
Give us 1,000 years.
It's also interesting because, like, when you look at this story, it kind of it locks into like the stories of the different world religions really well too, because you go back, originally all the religions were all polytheistic. They had these pantheons of gods who were individuals who manipulated the world in different ways, which sure sounds like a race
aliens
of ETs down
will have
here
different abilities or different jobs.
Right, have different assignments and different things under their power. Like
I'm the one who's going to teach you agriculture. I'm the one who's going to show you how to fish. I'm the one, like Poseidon and whoever these gods were.
Right.
For the different things.
And then as they're trying to step back out of the limelight, then it makes sense for them to like maybe, push their finger on the scales here and try and like
test things.
Well, no, like try and get rid of those old polytheistic religions in order to replace them for religions that, put them in the background.
I see. Yeah. No, you're right. Actually, I didn't think about that. Yeah. As they're trying to back away from the earth, they're like, hey, let's try to, because they're starting to think of us as gods, and they're putting up these monuments and shrines to us, and they're praying to us and stuff. We should probably back off. Or they were ripped from the earth, like in this, like he's talking about. They were like, hey, you're not, what are you guys doing over here building sentient, like evolving sentient life on this planet? Like that's against our laws. And sure, you're doing it for the right reasons, but hey, come back here. We're going to send a different crew out there. They'll make sure they'll clean up your mess. And those beings are the ones who are like, hey, they're quite sentient now, but they're really barbaric, and they're really, and they were following those people. Like they think of them as gods.
They're like, all right, listen, that old religion, you need to forget it. Here's the new one. Here's 10 rules here, and here is the truth of the matter is there's only one God. And all of these other things that you used to consider gods, like you can think of them as angels or demons or whatever, but they're not God.
Yeah, or even not even just specifically telling them that, but like just pointing, like all you would really need to do is just denigrate the gods they were seeing enough to make people be like, okay, well, why are we worshiping them? They did nothing for us. They just abandoned us here, whatever, and then you just plant the seed of like, what you really should be worshiping is the creator of everything. And the creator of everything, whatever that might mean for you in your area, right? Because they all already had different people and different lowercase g gods.
Ancient mythology people who talk about like, because Judaism being the first like big monotheistic religion, when they dig into the sources of Judaism and their one God, that was Yahweh. And when they describe him, he's like this like jealous, what was previously a storm god. And so it's almost like this tribe was worshiping one of these gods as their god.
Because he was...
But then in Christianity, it starts to change into like the God who created the universe.
So this one was like a jealous one who's like, hey, like I'm the one you were worshiping. Now you're all of a sudden you're starting to worship this other creator God. Like I'm the one.
Well, is that what he was claiming he was the creator God, and he was saying...
But after being known as the storm god, right?
Right.
So beforehand, he was known as the storm god, and he was the one that did this task for them or taught them this task or whatever.
And I'm like grossly oversimplifying it, so I'll drop some links. I think it's like people like Mr. Mythos and stuff.
Okay.
But anyway, we are ready for a break, and I just got another work call, so let me take that, and we'll be back with you guys in just a few. This is Stevie Nader, Take You On. Enjoy.
I've been caught in a storm before. You turned and said to me I was out past the shore, sailing towards a dream, and I promised myself that I never sail one step off my coast. Among the things to say, among the things to say, among the things to say, among the things to say. Say I would take you on, I take you on, I take you on. Say I would take you on, take you on, I take you on. Once I was lost in the woods, you slowly start to say, rain beat down where I stood, as I tried to find my way, and I swore to myself that I never sail one step off my path. Among the things to say, among the things to say, among the things to say, among the things to say. So I would take you on, I'd take you on, I'd take you on. So I would take you on, take you on, I'd take you on. So I would take you on, I'd take you on, I'd take you on. So I would take you on, take you on, take you on. You know I was on the shore and standing at the wooden exit door, 'cause it was you that I was waiting for. Yeah, that was me standing on the shore and knocking at the wooden exit door, 'cause it was you that I was waiting for. But I would take you on, I 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 take you on. I take you on, I take you on, I take you on.
All right, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Segment 2. So that was one of the videos I wanted to show you.
Yeah, but I want to talk about it a little more real quick.
Yeah, of course.
So there were some other thoughts. Because the other thing to consider with that story, the other things that like is like it does oversimplify a bit.
History,
like,
you mean?
He didn't go over like the big aspect of the flood, for instance. And he didn't go over, you know, things like the sort of Tower of Babel mythology with us all kind of splitting ways. And so I think, you know, if this is in fact part of our history, the story he gave, it's so far back in our history that are sort of spreading out amongst the continents and into different cultures. Probably happened, you know, after we were, you know, ejected from the garden at that point in the history.
So so it all happened in one location with all the entirety of the population.
In the entirety of what would have been the population of humans at the time, the newly genetically created ones, right?
The newly genetically created, right?
And then the later interactions are like the ones coming down and like
afterwards,
kickstarting civilizations and whatnot.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, he kind of infers it in a sense of like he talked about how they're like the old ETs, the ones who came down originally, were ejected from, I think that was the word he used, ejected from planet Earth after it was found that they broke some laws.
Right. That part of it sounds very much like a waspy.
And if that's true, then you know, you would just assume there's some gap.
Right, right.
And what is I mean, clearly from their story, time was of the essence to them. But if of the essence to them is millennia,
right,
you know,
they could be working on totally different time scales, and it makes sense that they would be
right. So a short time to them is 100 years, like a very minuscule, like fraction of a second to us. To them would be like 100 years, right? Let's say 100 years, a lot can happen. If your so-called gods are just ejected from your planet, and they were the ones leading you and guiding you and telling you everything what to do, you know, and they're gone. And then 100 years later, you have all these myths and all these things, and then 100 years later, these other beings come down and spread out amongst the humans. Then 100 years, long time for things to spread out, and internal strife, right? This idea of like when the fallen angels coming down.
Right.
In
that's
the old
a later
biblical
phase.
stories.
That's after being ejected from the garden, right? And that's probably happening along with the, God's coming down and kind of kickstarting civilization in different areas.
Yeah, so you have this populace who was completely directed by these ETs and deified by the humans. And then they have no direction all of a sudden. And then 100 years goes by and they're scattered, they're warring, they're frustrated, they don't know what to do, they're just surviving. And then the fallen angels come down and they're giving all this stuff that like
sort of
he kind of inferred,
because like the whole idea of like the tree of knowledge, right? Like seems like.
But he was talking about it in a more literal sense, and it's like it was a story, yes. But take what is being said literally, and make it make sense to any sensible human. Then without the fanciful story around it,
right.
It's that there's knowledge that is to be gained, and you learned of the knowledge.
Yeah, he's also hinting at some stuff like with them disabling parts of our DNA,
right?
Which would tie back into like the old myths about us like having longer lifespans previously. There's in the whole New Age movement and stuff. There's like these ideas. Well, and like some of the stuff we've been talking about, like there's a lot more evidence. There's evidence now of like things like remote viewing and reincarnation and psychic, telepathic sorts of abilities, all the sorts of stories where, people are, having UFO encounters and abductions. It's almost universally that the communication is done telepathically throughout all those stories. That's a very common trope.
And I bet you if you looked at their DNA, it's also common that they have some sort of anomaly within their DNA.
And it could be that is the breaking of the tongue with the Tower of Babel story.
Yeah.
Is you turn off our ability to
connect,
be telepathic, communicate directly
to
with
connect
each other. And all of a sudden we have to develop these languages.
To connect afterwards.
But because of those languages and the way languages evolve, we end up separating from each other, which causes us to not come together and work together.
So you have the language to reconnect you, but your connection is now severed. And so, maybe there is something to the idea that, when all people on Earth are able to use their voice in one and, communicate, like the internet has brought about being able to communicate across the world and share ideas and all these things is like, but once they like truly understand that what their origins were and what they could do when they're all, using together and have that communication, maybe that's like a key to like, some sort of key to unlocking that ability within our DNA.
It has interesting implications too for like
because originally, hold on, sorry, I just want to finish this thought. Because originally, right, if you're going on this story, originally we were all one, created by these ETs. We were all one group, and you just worked together. And if you take into account the fact that they may have turned on and off certain parts of the DNA to make certain people more docile, it's also possible that they left certain DNA markers within certain leaders within that to help mitigate some of the day-to-day problems that you enlightened just enough to have some more knowledge to be able to help control the people even better. And maybe those genetic lines passed on through time because when those ETs were ejected, maybe it wasn't written down or because it was against even like the most strict laws of theirs, they didn't tell anybody they had these spies or these certain leaders within the human group to have these enlightened abilities, and that DNA didn't go away. It just continued to pass on.
Ties to where I was going to go, which is like there's implications for like the way societies have been run and like the idea of like monarchies and the divine right of kings and stuff, you know, like a king being anointed by God to rule.
Right. It kind of, it like reframes a lot of those stories to make sense without having to go so woo with it, you know?
Right.
Like if you take into account what science is telling us is likely possible, that we are not alone in the universe. Like science hasn't admitted that they see aliens or anything, but they're saying that it's really not that unlikely.
Science as a whole hasn't, but like certain
scientists within certain fields, sure.
Now we have all this, you know, growing group of government whistleblowers
and scientists too. There are scientists coming out against this stuff too, and they're starting to trickle out real slowly. You got like Brett Weinstein, and you got, you know, some of these other people. Brett's still pretty
skeptical on the.
I think it's Eric.
Yeah, on the UFO stuff. I don't know what Eric's
He's skeptical. He's skeptical, but Brett's
like still uncomfortably skeptical. His recent appearance on Joe, he was kind of pushing back against like.
I'm thinking of
Joe
Eric.
had just had Lou Elizondo on, so he's bringing up some of that stuff with.
It was Eric
Brett.
that I'm thinking of. That he's way more open-minded about it.
Yeah, because Eric is the one who's like. He got kind of convinced by the whole brain drain and like gravity research that went dark.
Yeah.
I don't know that he necessarily takes it to like aliens are real, but he at least thinks like UFO technology is, I think. So I don't know if Eric's view is more that the UFOs we're seeing are just secret tech.
Super advanced secret tech that they're not going to release for like 100 years if they can,
or if
they
he
can keep it secret.
That it all sort of ties back to reverse engineering.
Right.
But anyway, super interesting. It makes me want to.
There's less evidence of that. But
I'm going to do a deeper dive on Bashar now because the last one you showed me was interesting, but like this one was like, okay, I thought you're speaking my language now.
Yeah, I thought you would like this one a lot. Let's go to the links I got in there. Let's go to this second one, and then we'll end on a quick little interesting one that I think you'd appreciate.
All right, here we go. Glowing orb transforms into human in Mexico.
Yeah.
It looks like some sort of firefly. Oh, shoot.
Yeah. And then look, it looks like two now. Like you see two different heads there, like one lower right, and it looks like the arms are shaped like it looks like there's two. And then when they slow it down and keep it zoomed in, you can see. Look at
it's smearing,
and then it just disappears, and then you see the
light
like
smear.
Yeah, and then you see the light kind of appear within it. I don't know what that spotlight is over there. Or if that's like a reflection of within the room. But pause it real quick.
Whoa, that's interesting.
So, right there, go back.
I can't go back.
Oh, yeah, forget Instagram.
Dude.
But at the very beginning,
you see the two appear
and then disappear and then come back as one. But then you start to see them kind of split again here.
Well, they could just be standing next to each other, or like one person holding in the other person.
That's what I'm looking at. Yeah, that's what I'm seeing. Is like one on the shoulder of the other, kind of holding the front.
Huh.
And then they kind of like fade into the.
Whoa.
And then, you know what this reminds me of is the descriptions that Christopher Bledsoe would talk about when the orbs would visit him.
Yeah.
And like he would see the orb come up as close as possible, and then all of a sudden it dissolves, and then the being appears.
Right.
Which is also ghosts, you know, like who knows, a lot of different like types of the paranormal that happen. These stories of the paranormal.
That's a good one. I mean, I wish people wouldn't release cell phone footage of video surveillance.
Yeah.
Like just export the video surveillance and upload that.
Yeah.
But it's a little pet peeve of mine, being a guy who used to install video surveillance. Like, just save the footage, man.
It's so easy. You just save it and then upload that.
Dang, that's crazy. So
it's cool.
Here's the caption that was uploaded on August 22nd, 2024 at 4:26 a.m. A security camera captured a glowing orb of light slowly transformed into a person. This mysterious event happened in Mexico. How would you explain this? Huh. All right. And then
we'll go to this one. It's
let's check this out.
8 years old when I realized Big Hero 6 is part of the MCU. This is just crazy. Wait for it. So we know Hero's brother, Tadashi, dies in a fire. Now check this out. After realizing Stan Lee is Fred's father, I spotted Tony Stark in the research lab where Tadashi worked. But why is he there? Well, get ready to find out. You find the answer in Avengers: Age of Ultron, where in one scene you can spot a Tadashi chip.
What?
Built by Tony himself to bring Tadashi back to life. This is the coolest connection ever.
I thought you might appreciate that.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Whether the worlds are actually connected or if it's nods to each other's work, but either way, it's cool.
All right, I need to take a quick, tiny mini break. I have to go to the restroom.
All right, we'll take a break.
All right. I guess we might as well music it, and then we can have a nice segment for...
Yeah.
All right, so enjoy this. This is TJ McNulty, Callow.
It's 3:15 in each other's company, but we have our tendencies to be awake rather than sleeping. We stare into the land of imagination, transfixed by man's creation, and we're always too awake to be asleep, because it's just one of our loves, a foolish love. Well, people say imagination is only for the young, but it's still one of our loves, a foolish loves. Well, you can say that's not much to be proud of, but we're gonna be more proud of our foolish love. Well, we all fall 13,000 feet just because we love the feeling of smiling. Well, call us weird, hell yeah we are. Our quick noises and fast lip poisons, we would all die for our aspirations. We are all one of our own creation. We are all one of each other's love, a foolish love. Simple minds is the most we could ever ask of. Our love, a simple love. Well, I am who I am because of my friends and their simple love.
Welcome back. So, Drew's just plugging in his headphones here. Yeah, so shall we, dive into some secret history?
All right. So this is chapter 13, reason, and how to rise above it. Esoteric Buddhism, Pythagoras, and Lao Tzu. So, yeah, this chapter was really fascinating. I want to start by just reading the introduction here to kind of lay the groundwork for kind of the generation of like the Buddha, the idea of the path to enlightenment and all this stuff.
Okay.
So this is, this is the beginning of the introduction. So Prince Siddhartha was born into a time and a place characterized by small warring states in Lumbini in modern-day Nepal. Until the age of 29, he lived in pampered luxury. His every need was met before it began to tug on him, and his every vista was a delight. Then one day, he left the royal palace and saw something he had never been allowed to see, an old man. He was horrified, but he looked further, discovering that his own people were ill and dying. He decided to leave the palace and his wife and child in order to try and make sense of this suffering. Living among ascetics for 7 years, he failed to find what he was looking for in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and the teachings of the descendants of the rishis. Then, finally, when he was 35, he went and sat under the Bodhi tree in the banks of the river Naranjara, determined not to move until he understood. After 3 days and 3 nights, he realized that life is suffering. The suffering is caused by desire for earthly things, but that you can achieve freedom from all desire. Indeed, you can achieve such freedom and such affinity for the spirit world that you need never reincarnate again. So you may become, as Siddhartha did, a Buddha. So that was really just the idea of, I guess he wasn't the first, but he kind of understood. Maybe he was the first. I can't remember I don't remember Buddhism all the history of it
well enough. Interesting. Okay. I have heard that sort of like general
idea, story,
push, or that general outline of like Buddhism being about like the idea that life is suffering.
Yeah, life is suffering and foreboding earthly, possession,
all earthly attachments, all desire,
right? That you can
become enlightened. And yeah, that's interesting.
So he goes on to talk a lot about the Eightfold Path of Buddhism. You've heard about that?
I've heard the term.
Yeah. So he talks a little bit about it, but I looked it up and I wanted to just kind of give people an idea of what it is. So the Eightfold Path is a practice in Buddhism to achieve enlightenment or nobility, So it starts with, number 1, to have the right view. Our actions have consequences. Death is not the end, and our actions and beliefs have consequences after death. The Buddha followed and taught a successful path out of this world and the other world. Later on, the right view came to explicitly include karma and rebirth, and the importance of the Four Noble Truths, when insight became central to Buddhist soteriology, especially the Theravada Buddhism. So number 2 is having the right resolve, can also be known as the right thought or right aspiration, right motivation. In this factor, the practitioner resolves to strive towards nonviolence and avoid violent and hateful conduct. It also includes the resolve to leave home and renounce the worldly life and follow the Buddhist path. Number 3 being the right speech. No lying, no rude speech, no telling one person what another says about him to cause discord or harm to their relationship. No idle chatter.
No idle chatter. That's a tall order.
That's an interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not especially talkative.
Yeah.
I am when we're like talking like in deep conversation, but
outside of that gear. Just happy to chill.
That's interesting.
And
I'm
then,
like sizing myself up by these.
the right conduct or action. So no killing, or injuring, no taking what is not given, no sexual misconduct, no material desires. So
yeah, that's another hard one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of...
Or injuring, like, is that, intentional injuring, or is it like just like bumping into somebody, or, like,
I mean, I doubt, but
I don't know, maybe the hardcore.
Yeah, but like that sort of ties into like all the desires of the flesh type thing. And
yeah. So number 5 would be the right livelihood. No trading in weapons, living beings, meat, liquor, or poisons. The right effort is number 6, preventing the arising of unwholesome states and generating wholesome states. The Bojjhanga, 7 factors of awakening. This would include guarding the sense doors, or restraint of the sense faculties. So being able to like control your senses, I guess, would be right.
The way these are divided seem weird. Is this GPT?
No, this is Wikipedia.
Okay.
Number 7 would be right mindfulness, a quality that guards or watches over mind. The stronger it becomes, the weaker unwholesome states of mind become, weakening their power to take over and dominate thought, word, and deed. And then right samadhi, which it doesn't have a definition for.
Keep the mic a little closer.
The right, practicing 4 stages of meditation, which includes the proper, which includes samadhi, or the proper in the 2nd stage, and reinforces the development of the Bojjhanga. Anyway, yeah, so that's more of like actually sitting down in silence and meditating, being the 8th one. These are this was a short description of the 8.
So basically, be perfect, be vegetarian, and meditate a lot.
Do nothing to harm anything.
Don't desire anything.
So do nothing.
That's a really tall order.
Yeah,
I mean, well, no, it says you can do things, but all things that lead towards like harmony and like, wholesomeness or whatever, however worded it.
Or whatever.
But so like helping people, like helping the sick, the needy, the poor, like that type of stuff would be good. Teaching, growing food probably. I mean, it doesn't sound like you can't.
Obviously, you live a life. You just more you're.
You can't be making a living for profit. It sounds like.
Yeah, you're living just to live.
You would have to be like
giving
doing
things
that for others, right?
Yeah,
that's what it sounds like. Maybe, huh? I'm sure. I mean, that's why it's its own whole religion. Like the complexity of like actually attempting to approach your life that way, is
definitely admirable.
Learning, a lot of discipline, a lot of practice,
a lot of patience. Yeah. So yeah, that was So I want to read this next section here, and it talks a little bit about the Eightfold Path. So he talks a little bit about the Eightfold Path, but he talks about it as them being conscious, like being able to, like, once they reach this state, they're more conscious about what they're doing and like what their goals are. But in earlier times, like in Egypt and the secret societies that were using the pyramids of Egypt as their places. So I'll just read this part. There was a layer of meaning. Sorry, I'm thrown off by not hearing myself now. Too many problems. let me say. So, for example, the candidate had been, and this is the secret societies of Egypt at the time. So, for example, the candidate had been set into a deep death-like trance. Then, circle of 5 initiates then raised his vegetable body out of his physical body. They had worked on it, molding it and coaxing it into forms capable of perceiving higher worlds, so that when the vegetable body sank again into the physical body, the candidate reawoke and he was born into a new, higher form of life. Now, the followers of the Buddha consciously participated in their own initiation, consciously working on their own chakras. Part of this work was living a new, more moral way of life based on compassion for all living things. Because people were growing increasingly independent of the spirit world, there was dangers in people and individuals gaining this power without the proper training or without the proper attitude towards what they're learning. And that became a theme that he was reiterating, is like the danger of going, like being able to have the abilities of these people.
Yeah, so the abilities that the initiates are like striving towards, right? Like, so if we connect back, into all the topics we're talking about, these are probably things like, astral projection and being able to have like visions and being able to
experience a different plane of existence.
Yeah. All these sorts of things that are supposedly things you can attain through like spiritual enlightenment and stuff, right? But if you were to just give someone those abilities who didn't have the right sort of development and temperament and maturity, like they could use those things towards great harm, right?
Yeah. That was the idea he was pushing forward, is like, it is always, and he talks about it always being possible for people to gain those abilities without the use of like structured,
without the discipline
and the understanding of where it came from
and the growth.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting, like what might have, like, especially because these are a long time ago, like, right? So like these are practices that were happening. Buddhism still is around, but what is modern Buddhism to the original, right? I mean,
I don't know.
Is there a difference between modern?
I know there's
and
like different schools and stuff.
Right. That's what I mean. So like there might be different ideas of the original. So we're looking at Buddha right now.
Who lived in the 6th or 5th century BCE. So yeah, the religion goes back quite a ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
So, that was just the first part about the esoteric Buddhism. We'll skip ahead to the story with Pythagoras.
Okay.
So, Pythagoras was kind of like let me move this so I can read too. Pythagoras was kind of like a demigod in his time. Like he was thought of a lot like Jesus was, and like that he like had all these abilities and stuff.
Or like Hercules or whatever.
Yeah, like some of these demigods who had special abilities, more so than all other humans, basically, at the time. So in about 532, Pythagoras fell foul of the Polycrates, the despotic ruler of Samos. Forced into exile, he set up a small community, and this is kind of the generation of his philosophy and like the generation of his followers, this story. So I was going to start with that, but I thought I wanted to jump to it because the connection that I thought of. Anyway, let me continue. So forced into exile, he set up a small community. Too many things happening. Sorry, my AirPod died. Okay. He set up a small community, the first of several, in Crotona in southern Italy. Candidates for initiation into this community had to undergo years of training, including a strange diet that included poppy, sesame, cucumber seeds, wild honey, daffodil flowers, and the skin of a sea onion from which the juice had been completely extracted. So what I thought of immediately was Aang on his spiritual journey with the onion and banana juice.
Yeah.
When he was doing all his chakra work.
Yeah. We're talking about Avatar: The Last
Avatar,
Airbender.
yeah.
If you haven't seen it, it's great. Watch it.
Yeah,
Which I was also thinking of in the last part, because obviously, like that whole episode at the end of season 2 where he has to open all his chakras. He's learning all of this, like how to do that,
how to flow his energy
and
through,
like how to detach himself.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, I thought that was funny.
Yeah, it's an interesting mix. Well, the poppy, so that's related to
Opiates,
right? What were the other ingredients there? I know honey can, depending,
wild
some
honey.
types of honey are hallucinogenic, or it's a good vehicle for mixing in things.
Yeah, and then there's sesame seed and cucumber seeds, and then daffodil flowers, and then the skin of sea onion, which I'm not sure.
Sea onion.
From which the juice had been completely extracted, it says.
Right, so just like the fibrous material.
Yeah.
Huh.
Probably like a dried sea onion or something.
Yeah.
That's what I'm imagining. So Pythagoras was able to grant his pupils a great vision of the spirit worlds, which he would then interpret for them. Out of this, the first discursive teachings would emerge: mathematics, geometry, astronomy, and music. So in his day, Pythagoras was said to be the only human being able to hear the music of the spheres, which I think we've referenced before. We've heard about that concept. We've heard about the idea of the spheres and ascending and descending from heaven and
right.
as you die, right?
Right.
And this is the music of the spheres.
Right.
So he's able to hear, and it's also not even just that, but the planets. Like it's the same idea because you're moving through the planets in those spheres as you move up to heaven.
Well, also like in I know in like hallucinogenics, there's talked about being like a humming that comes on. Also, I could connect that to like OWASP, where like constantly all throughout it, they're always emphasizing like as these like beings come and go, like the ones who are like properly associated with the creator, like they're always singing wherever they go.
Right.
There's always and there's choirs of angels in Christianity,
right. and go back to the talk about the sun god from earlier chapters,
right? And
how he roared life into existence on planet. Like it was the vibration, it was the music,
right,
that sparked or at least moved matter into form, right?
Right. And then like so many practices that use music and rhythm to get people into these
chants
altered
and, like,
states.
Rituals and
Icaros with ayahuasca that the shamans will sing for you.
Yeah, music is definitely transformative. You can definitely transform a crowd, like we've seen with what's his name?
Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob Collier. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a story of Pythagoras discovering the octave scale.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
One day, Pythagoras was walking through town when he heard metal being pounded on an anvil. He noticed the different sized hammers made different sounds. Returning home, he fixed a plank of wood across the room and hung a series of weights on it in an ascending scale. By a process of trial and error, he determined that the musical notes that sounded beautiful to the human ear corresponded to different weights. He then calculated that when they were proportionate to one another in a mathematically precise way, it is from these calculations sorry, that Pythagoras would derive the musical octave we understand and enjoy today.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, do we credit the Greeks for figuring out the first music? Like figuring out like the first music theory, I wonder? It may go back earlier than that in like Eastern cultures.
Maybe in a more primitive way, or a different way, yeah. Or just separately.
Gotta ask Perplexity.
Let's see who we credit.
They made significant contributions. It wouldn't be accurate to credit them with discovering it entirely. It had evolved over thousands of years across various cultures and civilizations, which, yeah, that's kind of a Pythagorean tuning. Based on mathematical ratios, the system laid the foundation for understanding musical intervals.
The Pythagorean rhythm.
The Greeks established modes. And they came up with the earliest notation.
Notations.
Mesopotamia shows evidence of musical scales and tuning systems. Egypt suggests the existence of musical notations and theoretical concepts. China developed sophisticated music systems, including the pentatonic scale as early as 3000 BCE.
Oh, wow. Damn.
Huh. That's cool.
Yeah, he's in there. So, it seems like a lot of his followers, like this was their like what their task was, is to kind of blend the spiritual and the esoteric to more of a scientific base. Like you can take what you're experiencing in a spiritual way and mathematically and analytically like define it.
Right.
In the physical.
Right.
And so that's kind of like what was happening. It was like, they're experiencing it this way. Like we talked about, like the long walk in the woods, right? The way that these people looked at the world back then.
Right.
Everything was spiritual. Everything had a purpose or a meaning or some sort of human characteristic behind it.
Yeah.
And so when they experienced these things, it came to them as stories almost. At least this is what it seems like based on a lot what's passed down, right?
Yeah.
And the stories behind a lot of these things and what they were into, and and it could be skewed. Like we know skewing happens. So
Sure.
But
I mean, it's pretty impressive. Like when you get into music, you start learning music theory, like, I mean, it can get as complicated as you want it to get, but like it's pretty impressive, the idea of like coming up with the mode system. That's really impressive. I didn't realize that goes back to Pythagoras. That's so cool.
It's interesting, just like in general, like as things progress and you look back on like earlier technologies and like how people that the way we see those people, how they hold on, I just noticed I never plugged in your computer and it's about to die.
Oh, whoops. Oh, it'll last a while. I got the new MacBook. We got much more efficient chips.
Sorry,
but that actually could have had to do, maybe it was underpowering it, which was causing the weirdness with the audio. I don't
Unmute
know.
it. Let's see.
Nah, I don't want to.
You don't want to
go through that weirdness again.
Okay. But yeah, sorry to dislodge us there, but just it's interesting, just the roles that these but historical and ancient peoples had on our modern life, and what we might have on potential future, like what contributions, we're making now.
Right. I mean, there's so much being developed right
How
now.
long it might last?
We're 2,500 years from Pythagoras here, and can you imagine all the contributions that are happening right now in our modern age and what they'll look like in another 2,500 years?
Yeah. And what iteration we're on then? So I want to read the next excerpt here. As Pythagoras and his followers began to describe the rational element in life, they started to formulate a parallel concept. It was a concept which had perhaps never been articulated before, because up to that point it had been a part of everyone's everyday life. The concept went like this: life can be explained in rational terms only up to a point. There is a vast irrational element to life as well. The teachings of the mystery schools relating to the rational side would help build cities, develop science and technology, structure and regulate the outworld. The irrational teachings, at least in its explicit forms, would be confined to schools. To talk about outside was dangerous and might well attract hostility. Plutarch said that anyone who knows the higher truths finds the serious values of society difficult to take seriously.
The serious values of society difficult to take seriously?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So anyone of higher intelligence, I would assume. But he was fond of quoting Heraclitus, and Heraclitus, I don't know. Heraclitus, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. And he said, eternity is a child at play. So living for eternity is like being that energetic being, right? That just being if you're a Buddhist too, even like you're at the point where you've gotten back to your spiritual beginning. Like it seems like your development would have changed.
Well, I think that saying there is also it's calling out to the experience of play as a child, right? That the experience of time dilation when you're like so enwrapped, so enmeshed, so in wonder of the world around you in play.
Time seems to stand still.
Stand still is so slow.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can be
doing some mundane thing, and
like Wyatt or Sawyer could be sitting there like playing, and to them they're in their own world, and it's like hours and centuries going by of their discovery and play, and like for you sitting there watching them, like maybe it's like 10 minutes, right? But like they had a whole journey.
Yeah, exactly. And then when they come up and they interact with you again, and it seems like they're bouncing around the room from thing to thing because that's what they're doing. They're going around,
like
and
it looks so like anxiety, like it looks like
chaotic.
ADD, like almost chaotic, but like no, like this is
prime development.
Yeah.
And they're just so enthralled in their play, whether
they're going from
throwing the books
world
off
to
the
world.
shelf or jumping in a pile of stuffed animals, or they're learning about everything. They're learning what it is to be alive in every moment that they're doing these things.
Right.
So they're so energetic and they're so like childlike that eternity is like that. Like if you can live your life in such a way that you are basically a child and you're just so energetic and like so full of
just
wonder,
learning
and
to stay in a
state of play and wonder, that
then you create
that eternity, literally. Even
that's how I interpret it. I think
I think that's pretty accurate. So there's a small excerpt here that I highlighted. I wanted to go. So individuals like Pythagoras, Newton, and Leibniz, those who have done most to help humanity get to grips with the reality of the physical universe, have also been deeply immersed in esoteric thought. This is because it is undoubtedly true, as these great minds have seen, that if you look at life subjectively as possible, rather than objectively, as you must do in science, some very different patterns emerge. Life viewed objectively may be rational and subject to natural law, but experienced subjectively, it is irrational. By consciously splitting experience in this way, Pythagoras made it possible to think more clearly about both dimensions.
Right.
So clearly separating the two worlds in such a way where you can jump into one and jump into the other, and you can you don't need to mix those two things, and it clears you up. Or you mix them in a personal way, but your mind is able to.
I'm thinking of it as them. Like they belong together, like a yin yang. You know, like they're a duality that belongs together. Like,
but I'm saying
the rational aspect is there to like structure and learn about that irrational aspect. You know, and the irrational aspect is there to get you out of the monotony and doldrum of the rational aspect.
Mm-hmm. But I think what he's saying there too is like the idea that at one time you might have thought of those as one thing before you were able to separate them to the two parts of the whole.
Right.
Before you were able to like defog yourself from the illusion that things are one way or the other, you realize that they're both ways, and you have to allow both of those things to swirl around in you,
right,
to truly understand.
You know, that's really interesting, because I see this trend in like people who are very academically minded. There seems to be this sort of like two sorts, right? So obviously you get those people who are like the STEM people, right? They're like ultra rational, ultra logical, like they live and breathe for like understanding, dissecting, cataloging, measuring. And then you have those like in the sorts of like humanities and stuff. And for them, there's, you know, well, even within that, there's kind of two distinct groups. There's like the groups who are like the, you know, the rationalists, and there's the ones who are like less rational. They're more subjectivist. And, you know, you hear a lot of warnings about this sort of like the irrationalist mentalities. And I think there is danger there if you go into that and allow that. So like in the same way there's a danger being overly logical, overly rational, and it can kind of lead to this sort of like dead scientific,
rigid,
deterministic, dogmatic view of the world, where there's no mystery. If you go ultra irrational, ultra subjective, then things can sort of not matter, right? Because what matters for me doesn't matter for you, and I can do whatever I want. There is no right and wrong. Like, you know, like there is danger in that side of things too.
For sure.
So it seems wise to have like a sort of marrying of those two forces, like separate them to understand that they are different, and they embrace them both so that they both inform each other.
Yeah.
Right. So like science can inform the irrational by taking things like music, taking things that we don't understand about the world and helping us to learn about them and catalog them and like build concepts on them, make new discoveries.
And encode them in a sense in us, right? Like you can encode these concepts in us, but I think in a mathematical way.
Can also serve the logical, you know, side through inspiration, through play and discovery and creativity. Like it's sort of like the idea of like, you know, you gotta have some time to like speculate and theorize and bullshit and like have a drunk fire pit conversation with someone saying what if about a bunch of like sci-fi issues.
Exactly.
And then when you clock back into work at the university the next Monday, like maybe one of those issues sparks like a hypothesis you can then go and scientifically test. Like the two should
overlap,
work together. Right.
Yeah, you should be able to, and that's, you know, where we see a problem, or I see a problem in society, is like people wanting to do one or the other.
Right.
Right. You're either super you're either super into like your spiritual stuff and you're or whatever, and then you're a hardcore, you know, atheist scientist who just can't believe, only wants to hear about facts and only wants to, you know, do the digging themselves. You know, both have value, but like within yourselves, you want to find that balance between those two sides of yourselves, where your head is telling you one thing, but your heart is telling you another thing, and you have to balance those two things to, you know, inform your decisions. you want that same balance in society. You want to
Right.
you want to have a balance of like,
But just how we need it in society, we need it within our own minds too.
yeah,
Right? Like it's natural that some people are going to lean more on one side or the other, but like you have to be careful of leaning so far to the exclusion,
yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Like if you're scientifically minded, like read some poetry, listen to some music, like dance, like get
Yeah.
out of your head every
Yeah.
once in a while and like let the spirit take you over, you know?
Yeah. Well, I've got a few. I got a few quotes from Lao Tzu and Confucius. If you'd like to, I think we'll end a little early today. But,
Okay, you want to go into those and then
yeah, I've skipped ahead quite a bit, but
okay.
the connection between, so in the era of Pythagoras, two other philosophers on different sides of the world, Heraclitus in Greece and Lao Tzu in China, briefly come to the surface in history, trying to define rationally the irrational dimension of life. So if you compare Confucius with Rudyard Kipling, who are both servants of empires, if scientific materialism describes everything in this life, Kipling's poem "If" would be the last word on the conduct of life, and esoteric philosophy would have nothing left to teach us. So this is
The poem If.
Rudyard Kipling's poem. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after you are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which say to them, hold on. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that is in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son.
Read that one more time. Sorry,
Yeah, no,
lost
I
that
will.
first half.
If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after you are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you, except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that is in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. So yeah, I think that first part, forcing your heart, your nerve, and your sinew to serve you your turn long after you're gone is kind of the idea of like
building a legacy.
building a
type thing?
legacy and passing on traditions down, so that what you have built be passed down, and like you're saying, hold on. They hold on to the idea of you. And then if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything in it. So I think it's just the idea of digging deep and like understanding that reframing your focus to the minute and not how long it's going to take you in the long run.
Oh,
You can
interesting.
go as far as you want to go. That's kind of how I see that, as like being kind of an inspirational thing. If you can focus your mind to focus on
It's
1
talking
minute
about
at a
focusing
time.
on the moment, basically like
Yeah,
being in
be
the here and
moment.
now.
Yeah, be in the here and now, and the earth is yours. Understand that life only happens now. It doesn't happen in the past. It doesn't happen in the future. Those are all constructs of your mind. Living in the moment is the only place you can actually live.
I'm seeing the dichotomy here, right? And that's why this is like an if, right? Like, so like on the one hand, like you want to build a legacy, you want to have a purpose, right? This is the sort of like logical sides goals in life, right? Like it's like, well, I got to achieve this and achieve that and achieve that because, my my legacy, I want to leave something for my children, right? Like that's kind of like that is like the desires and the motivations of the logical side, but like the desires and the motivation of the illogical, the irrational side is to live in the moment and like be in the here and now. So if you can build that legacy, build that purpose, achieve those goals while
being in the here
and now on the way there.
That's the ideal.
Right.
Is being able to stay focused on your long-term goal while also just only making choices.
Build your here and now in a way that will lead you towards the things that your logical side of you wants.
Yes.
Understanding
what your desire is, but only acting on what you can act on here and now, not dwelling on the past, not hoping for something to come to you in the future, just acting on what is in front of you. And that will help you attain and maintain that, because, people do get caught up, and it happens in business too, as much as it happens in, if you're trying to build some kind of, business from the scratch, like you have this idea in your head, but you're thinking too far in the future, or you're thinking too much about what's happened already.
Or we have this way as like we grow up and like as we, become cynical with life and stuff, right? Where like we focus on like adulting, right? We focus on like these things we need to do. Like I have to do this, I have to do that. And you're thinking, like everything's like listed and documented, like
laid out. Your next day's plan is laid out in your head.
Right. So like we can end up following a path laid out by our logic to where we're sacrificing the ability in a moment to just be in that moment.
Be spontaneous and to be
spontaneous.
Yeah.
So how can you achieve both at the same time? And that does seem like the key, but like that sounds like a very difficult
road to maintain.
Tightrope to walk.
Yeah, it's a hard path to maintain and to continue on, probably, even if you were to achieve it. So the next one I wanted to go over was sometimes when you grab at what you want, you just push it a little further away. Sometimes the only way to keep something is by letting it go. That's that. It's kind of a similar. So, and Lao Tzu says, because the awakened one puts himself behind, he steps ahead. Because he gives away, he gains. Because he is selfless, he fulfills himself. The still is the Lord of the restless.
The still is the Lord of the restless. Whoa.
So yeah, I'm imagining just a sea of restless people, and the ones who are still, the statues they pray over are the Lord's.
Well, yeah, but like restless is like someone who like, like
fidgets and
like can't.
Or it could
moving.
Just be restless in more of a philosophical sense, like restless.
Well, right, like you're always having to go for something, achieve something, do something, like, but like the stillness is the Lord of that too, or like that's the ideal, right? It's always that yin and yang. It's the dichotomy of it. Exactly.
Because the still person is only the Lord of the, or the restless person is only subjected to the still person if they don't themselves have the capability of becoming still at any moment's notice. If you were to think about like the idea,
I was reading it more as like a thing to strive for, right?
No, I agree, but I'm just saying, like in this, analogy, like the restless person, if you were to gain the ability to play both sides, to be restless in certain aspects of your life, or when you need it to be restless, right?
Yeah.
And then being still and being able to be more confident and emboldened by your position gives you the ability to lord over your restless self, because the restlessness is more of a tool, whereas the stillness is the goal, right? So the stillness being lord over the restless, because if you gain the ability to become still, you now lord over your restlessness, because it's not something that, it's like, you know what I mean? Like restless, or it's kind of like mind over body. Like, your mind is always a part of the body, and the body is always part of the mind. They're not two different things, or are they? Right? Like, which one actually lords over? If you were able to control your mind and control your breathing, and you're able to control your body enough, you can settle restlessness with your mind. So maybe it is an analogy of, or a metaphor for mind over body.
Yeah, or the sort of two sides of the brain, right? Like, it's funny. We did the Ren, High Ren, right? And like he talks about that, like that, you know, in his monologue at the end, he talks about the pendulum swinging, and he talks about learning to, you know, to dance with that sort of force. Yeah. And you can also see that as like those two sides that we're laying out here. And then I combine that with like other things I've been thinking about lately, which is like, you know, I'm sure we've all thought, like, we all know that we are a form of life that is actually a community of smaller life, right? Like, it is an entire civilization of cells that come together in some harmony.
Maybe multiple civilizations of cells,
and that's kind of where I was going with it, because like as you said, like maybe there is something separate in you, and like maybe that actually is what's going on, is that like as like in a sort of fractal manner, we're like building up from smaller individual organisms into these tissues and these organs and these sections of the brain, and they all are in some sense, in a real way, their own individual element that is contributing to the consciousness of the whole. And so there actually is a battle between these sides of your brain that are represented by these forces. Right. And you have to learn to like address them both, let them both have their like time in the limelight.
Yeah, because if you are just allowing the whatever the majority rule in your body is, dictate what you do, right? So if they're like the majority of your consciousness, it can lead you down a path that only serves that,
right? Which actually
seems to happen. Like, right? If you were to just think of a problem you've had, right, physically or whatever, and you like zoom out and like think about it, like all the different aspects of that are at play, like, you know, muscle, tissue, bones, all these different things, and they all have there's different, you know, cells within different parts of your body, and they have different functions and all these things, right? And what if the majority, like, I'm just thinking, like, this is totally hypothetical, is if you were complete, so like the mind or all the beings or living whatever is within your mind are not the majority, but they are thought of as a higher order.
Or they're
and then you have all the body.
They're all given validation as their own aspect within you, you know?
Yeah.
Like, you have to hear them all out. Like, you have to give them all their own.
Reminds me of the movie Inside Out.
Right. It's like learning.
Which we've talked about before multiple times.
Right. It's like learning. Have we?
Yeah, we have.
It's like learning.
At least the second time.
To not just let one of those emotions become the dictator, kicking all the other ones out of the control room, right? Like, in a similar way, like, you have to acknowledge all these things, and you have to like learn to allow them to work as a community. Like, you know,
allow the things that you may have otherwise wanted to suppress come to the surface, right? Even when we're talking about thoughts or feelings or this or that, like you think something,
it's
like
coming up for a reason.
It's coming up for a reason, and
there's there's something in you that wants it to come to your attention, and if you push it back down,
you're bottling.
There's something in you that you're
capping.
Right. If you can think of it as like an entity within yourself, a sub-entity that makes you up one of the, you know, pieces,
parts of you.
And it's doing its job by presenting information to you, only for you to turn around and be like, no, bad job. You're not allowed to talk.
Yeah.
Like, that's a part of you that's there for a reason. And by ignoring or suppressing that part of yourself, you're doing it at your own peril.
Yeah.
Like if you only let the logical side of your brain
dictate
drive your life, it can be really dry and dull. If you only let the intuitive, emotional side of your brain drive, you can make a lot of really stupid decisions. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you have to have
some sort of balance. You know, and that balance probably does look different for different people.
Of course. Yeah.
That balance could be that somebody who would otherwise be super logical and super like, I don't know, dominating or whatever, right? And they made the choice to go far right to balance themselves, or far the other way or whatever, right, left, whatever, up, down, you know, in or out, I don't know, to become more balanced. Like that might have to happen for some sort of people, you know?
Yeah.
But like that's something that each person would have to discover for themselves.
Well, and I think in a similar way, it applies on the next fractal level up to a societal level, right? Like we have to learn to not like hate each other for having differing political views. Like there are different people who have different viewpoints and reads on the world in important ways.
Or religious views for that matter. Or religious views for that matter, because, you know, as we've discussed before, a lot of these religions really seem to come from one story or some event.
Buddhism has a pretty unique...
Yeah.
It's not exactly a religion in the same... Well, I'm not calling it not a religion, but it's not a religion in the same way that other religions are.
Right.
Like, it's... I've heard it described, and if you're a Buddhist, maybe you can enlighten me more, but I've heard it described more like there's less
formality to it,
less of the mythology, less of the like it's like I've heard that it's possible to like even be like Buddhist and kind of like it doesn't even necessarily indicate a god per se,
right,
or at least a certain type.
It's more of a philosophical structure of trying to achieve a way to enlighten yourself so that you would experience whatever God may be for yourself.
It's sort of a practice and
maybe gods are different. Maybe that God or that thing or that experience is different for each person. So that's why they don't define it.
Yeah. But to your point, like we also need like, I think we need to be integrating all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think we need to, like when we see something that's so different from us, like the reaction of, oh, that's different, that's bad, stay away, or you're wrong, is, you know, shutting down your ability to integrate something new, you know? Like when I see someone who has different viewpoint than me, it sparks curiosity, not derision.
Yeah.
Like,
curious as to how they got to that point.
At least that's what I strive for, and I hope I strive to always achieve that. Sometimes it doesn't, but like, it's a great way to.
It's hard when the person's telling you that the Earth's flat.
Well, and it's hard when it depends on like how it's brought to you as well, right? Like if someone's coming at you in a very like judgmental way, it's hard to like. Sometimes that puts up your defense mechanism.
Yeah. So you come back. You come back a little more hostile.
Right. So, but if you could like release that defense mechanism and just hear them.
Yeah. So that was what I had for chapter 13. Hope you guys liked. I changed up the way I did it. I didn't read quite as much, and I jumped around a bit. And I think we sparked a lot of good conversation out of it.
I thought we got some good discussion out of that. That was cool.
So I'm going to continue doing that. We are officially halfway through this book.
Yay. I mean, awesome. So cool.
So
this is we're in September now. We started in January, the podcast launch. So we'll finish this sometime next year, which is cool.
Yeah, we might. I know Dean's got.
I like the idea of having like a book that is like the type of book that like we can continue to revisit over time. That's like, I think it's cool.
I think I might take a little bit of time to do the next one because I want to do a couple chapters in the same way and maybe get a full 2-hour episode out of it.
Yeah. As a teaser, I just finish the new Lou Elizondo book.
Yes.
So
that's next week.
That will be our next episode. And that will probably be a series 2, just because there's probably a good amount to talk about from it. Hopefully.
So maybe we'll do a couple on that back to back.
And it depends on how much I can prepare. But anyway, cool. Well, if you enjoyed the episode, leave us a like or subscribe on YouTube or Rumble. Give us a comment. Tell us what you think. If you're listening on podcasts, you can send us a review on Apple iTunes. You can also comment and review episodes on Spotify. If you want to contact us and have us read your communications on the show, you can email us, host@dualitycheck.net. You can message us on Facebook or Instagram.
Yep. Or check out our website at dualitycheck.net. We got everything up there. There's all the episodes, all of the links, all of the tags, everything you'll be able to find there. So yeah.
Alrighty.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We'll see you later.
Adios.